Welcome to the Pucks with Haggs podcast, a proud member of the CLNS Media Network. Make sure to hit subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel and turn on notifications for when a new video drops to the channel. The show is also brought to you by PrizePicks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Welcome in, everybody. This is the 206th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Subscribe and get yourself a premium membership. Get all of my Bruins and NHL writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write columns 3 times a week for the Boston Sports Journal, so check that out, along with the weekly Q&A I do, answering fan questions, which some of them I actually transfer over here to the podcast and answer them. Thanks, as always, for listening, commenting, interacting, being interested and passionate about the Bruins, and tuning into the podcast. We appreciate it, and we're glad that you're here. And we'll just keep them going throughout the summer here, going into next year, because there's tons of interest out there, obviously, and still stuff going on. Speaking of that, the news for this week, there wasn't a ton of Bruins news. But what was out there was an interesting hiring for the Providence Bruins coaching staff. Ryan Bourque, Ray Bourque's youngest son, gets hired over on the Providence Bruins staff, on Ryan Mougenel's staff in Providence. He joins Trent Whitfield on the staff there for the P-Bruins. Interesting hire. I think he's somebody that definitely can help them. Not too far removed from his playing career. He was mostly an AHL player, a little bit of NHL time, I believe, with the Rangers. My memory of watching him play last was actually, I want to say it was 2015, 2000. I can't remember exactly when it was. It was the beginning, maybe it was 14. It was the beginning of David Pasternak's career. He got sent down to Providence to play in the Providence AHL playoffs because the Bruins were either eliminated or not in it. And I believe he was playing Ryan Bourque's team, and it was the Hartford Wolfpack. And I remember going to a game in Hartford. Ryan was playing for the Wolfpack, and Ray was there after the game was over, and he was there during the game. But it had been a while since I had seen him play, but he just played up until recently. And he worked at the U.S. National Team Development Program, actually worked with Will Moore and with James Higgins when they were at the U.S. Development Program. So he's worked with a couple of the young Bruins prospects. He's worked with a slew of young guys recently. This past year, he was the head coach at Cushing Academy. So you're talking about a guy that I think can communicate well with the young players, helps in the sort of development phase for them. And it is not so far removed from his playing days that he still kind of speaks the language a little bit with the players. And I think it's important, especially in the AHL, in the minor league system, where you've got so many young guys that are on the development track, to have some younger coaches that can sort of like connect with the players on a different level than maybe guys can that are a little bit further removed from their careers and it's been a while since they played. So that, along with just, he's obviously a talented guy, had a really good hockey career. Both he and his brother Chris, sons of Ray, played locally and then ended up playing professionally. So nice addition to the Providence Bruins staff. It's always good to see a Bourque involved with the black and gold and back in the Bruins family. So I think that's something really good to see. And I think it's going to help having somebody that has worked recently in the U.S. Development Program that's involved with the Bruins coaching staff, given what a good job they do out there developing players and everything that he soaked up while he was out there for, I think it was a year, helping coach that program, I think is going to be nothing but an asset for the Boston Bruins. So good stuff there. Congratulations to Ryan on getting that gig. As far as Bruins news, that's about it for now. What I'm going to do is answer a few questions here and talk some Bruins, and then we're going to be out. And you can go enjoy your day and enjoy the beautiful sun and the July weather that we're having right now. And, we're really it's mid-July at this point. We're really getting to the portion of the hockey schedule, about July 15th to maybe August 15th, where there's not a lot going on. Everybody has signed. The trades have all been made. Everybody has retreated to their cottages in Canada somewhere, or the Cape or Maine or wherever they go. And basically hockey kind of takes a hiatus for about a month until mid to late August, when you start seeing captains practices really up their intensity, and they start popping up, and you see guys that are local start skating together at Warrior, and they're starting to get ready for training camp. I guess the other interesting thing that was done this week that's more from a global perspective is the extension for the CBA. I think it was 4 years, and some of the interesting things that are going to come out of that. And this is not going into effect until I think after the 26-27 season, I believe it was. But the schedule is going to change. They're actually going to move to 84 regular season games from 82. They're going to have, I think it was 4 preseason games, and that's it, which I think is great. I've been all in favor of lessening the preseason and adding a few more games to the regular season for a while now. It felt like it was kind of a money grab. Some of those preseason games where there were barely any NHL players in it, it was going on for like 8 games for like a month before they would get the regular season going, when you knew the veteran players were kind of ready to tune up in the final game or two and get ready to play. So I think that's a smart thing. They're changing the max contracts term wise. It used to be it was 8 years you could re-sign for if it was your own team, and 7 years if you were signing a free agent contract to a different team. Now it's going to be 7 years that you can re-up with your own team as a max term, and 6 years if you're signing with somebody else. They changed the e-bug qualifications and rules a little bit now, that you can have a traveling emergency goalie with you. There are a bunch of like qualifications they have to have, including never played an NHL game and a few other things that they have to qualify for. The unfortunate thing with that is it's going to rule out like the stories like David Ehlers, who was the guy that was driving the Zamboni in Toronto, that all of a sudden became the emergency goalie for the Hurricanes against the Maple Leafs. When he was the e-bug being provided by Toronto. And this was kind of the problem with the e-bug system, is that when you went to an NHL rink, the emergency goalie that was at that rink could play for either team, either the team that he was kind of employed by or the other team, which could create some awkward situations if, like what happens with David Ayers, he's employed by the Toronto Maple Leafs organization, and then he goes out and shuts down the Maple Leafs in a game, and it becomes kind of an awkward thing afterwards. It was an interesting wrinkle, but I think it did create like something of an issue where I think it makes much more sense for teams to have their own emergency goalie that is just theirs, that, sometimes practices with them and is a little more involved with their team, that comes in and plays with them, instead of like having them practice with your team, having them sort of be a pseudo part of the team. And then all of a sudden by circumstance, they have to actually play for a different team against the team that they've trained with. So I understand why they're doing it. I just hope they don't ever completely go away with it, because I kind of think the e-bug thing is something that really makes the NHL unique and adds a sliver of a chance for sort of a common man goalie that never got to live out his dream to play in the NHL, which I think is really cool. And a really unique thing that you don't see in other sports. So let's hope that continues to go on, even as they're sort of like whittling down the field of players that they're looking at, and kind of limiting sort of like some of the places that they could have played before they qualify as an emergency goalie. It seems like they have to have it's going to get to a point where they have to have had either NCAA or some kind of major junior experience or something like that, but as it should be for a bunch of them. All right. Let's start answering some questions here. Now that we're past the news of the week. Almeida 022680 asks, Trevor Kuntar was in the mix until the very end of camp last year and supposedly almost made the team. How did it go from that to him not getting a qualifying offer? Kuntar, I think it was second year pro he had this past year with the Providence Bruins. He was a draft pick out of Boston College. Had a decent first season, had over 100 penalty minutes, did okay offensively. But this year was in and out of the lineup, missed some time with injuries, and I think might have been a healthy scratch at certain points. I believe he only played in like 3 of the playoff games for a Bruins team that made it a couple of rounds. So he wasn't a automatic in the lineup in the playoffs, which is not a great sign if you're an AHL player that you're going to be sticking around. And I just think it comes down to, there comes a certain point where you just get replaced on the depth chart and another wave of young players comes in. I think Trevor Kuntar came in and was okay. I don't know that he was that close to making the team out of camp a year ago. I think he was one of the final players in training camp based on that he did pretty well for himself and that he had a decent camp and a good preseason. But I don't think he was all that close to making the team. I think they had kind of decided on what their fourth line was going to be and ahead of time. It was going to take a lot for any of those guys to not make it. But I think you saw that with Mark McLaughlin too, another BC guy that got traded in the middle of this year. And it's players I think that aren't going to get the opportunity here that maybe some other young guys are going to get, and other guys have sort of taken the lead as far as how they're being looked at. Like I think Riley Duran is a guy that kind of is in the same mold or a little bit of the same mold as a Trevor Kuntar, and I think he hopped him as far as how he's viewed by the organization, the chances he's going to get. And I think it's as simple as that. I think, you get to a certain point if you're a young guy and, if you don't really establish yourself as somebody that's going to help them in the NHL level after a couple years, there are more young guys coming through the pipeline that are potentially going to replace them and potentially become guys that could maybe help the NHL team at some point and certainly look like a more viable option. And I think, Riley Duran's just, he's maybe got a little bit more offensive upside than Trevor Kuntar. He's definitely bigger and stronger than Trevor Kuntar. He's not quite as sandpaper-y as Kuntar is. I mean, Kuntar, I think, was definitely a guy that was okay sort of going over the edge and, being a little bit of an agitator. And I don't see Riley Duran as being that kind of guy too much. Maybe that's something he's going to bring a little bit more of as time goes on. We'll see. But I think, I think it's based on that. I think Mark McLaughlin, like I said, same way. He came in, had a great NHL debut, helped them a little bit at certain points, but I think hit a wall where he wasn't going to really get much more NHL time. He came up when Joe Sacco took over and had a good little run, was not able to do enough to sort of solidify anything when he was up there. And I think that was it at that point. Maybe you're better off going to a different organization where you might get a little bit more of an NHL look with somebody else. But, there are other young guys coming in every single year that they're going to look at. And that's just the natural sort of circle of life with the NHL. So, I don't think there's anything beyond that, really. I think it becomes a numbers game at a certain point, and, he'll end up finding something somewhere else. But I think it's a pretty clear indication that the Bruins didn't see a future with him at the NHL level and didn't see him really even being a guy that was going to step up if there were injuries and fill in. They had some other guys in Providence that they feel like are at that point. And, there's other guys that are going to probably be in that camp before too long. Like, I was actually a little surprised that Georgii Merkulov was qualified and will be back, because I think it was Mark Diver was on with us and had mentioned something about Merkulov had kind of requested a trade or talked about that at some point last year and wasn't really happy with the looks he was getting at the NHL level with as while he was playing in Providence. It was hurt for most of the AHL playoffs. And, it seems like he's kind of very much at a crossroads with the Bruins where he can't really cinch a job. He can't really lock down an NHL job with this organization and hasn't really flourished offensively and really shown what, the potential that he has at the NHL level offensively when he's been up there, but has also been a guy that's been really good at the AHL level and shown everything he can do there. And he's kind of in between right now. And Fabian Lysell, I think, is quickly coming to a crossroads too, where he's got to start really like showing a very big step forward, or his time with the Bruins organization isn't going to be long either. And they traded Ryan Mast in one of those deals that they made around the beginning of free agency. Same thing. I think he was a guy that the writing was on the wall, that it was not going to happen here with the Bruins organization, so he moves on to somewhere else, and that's just the way it goes. This is why sometimes you kind of laugh at the people that go hog wild about prospects at any organization, the prospect nicks or the prospect experts. They're right up there with the draft nicks too. They will speak glowingly about these young players like they've got these huge futures. And look, just being pro is amazing. Like, they've accomplished a ton just playing pro hockey and getting to that level. It's a massive step. But like most of them are not going to make it to the NHL. And so when you speak so glowingly, talking about these prospects and their upsides and all this other stuff, you always have to keep in mind perspective of how tall the odds are that they face, how unlikely it is that they're ever going to develop into an NHL player, and how some of this lofty praise that you're giving them, they're not going to be able to live up to, and it's just not going to happen. Sometimes they will, but more often they will not. And they become players that move on to other organizations, play a few more years, and then sort of cycle out. And I think we're starting to see that with some of the guys that have been in the Bruins organization as they move on to other places. And that's what's happening. I mean, there's no shame in it. I hope Trevor Kuntar has really good luck and that he hooks on somewhere else. But that's what happens sometimes, that's the way pro hockey works for a lot of these players. All right, let's take a break here. And for those of you listening to this episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like, and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS and enjoying all this hockey talk, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Bruins content with fellow Bruins talkers like Conor Ryan and Evan Marinofski. There's also the CLNS Media Network and Celtics All Access on CLNS, the NBA History Channel, Patriots Press Pass, and Bruins Rinkside YouTube channels as well. Also, please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new Pucks with Haggs podcast video drops on the interwebs. Let's also thank our friends at PrizePicks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Join over 10 million users and get started today. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and it's super simple. On PrizePicks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports, combine your favorite hockey players with players from baseball, basketball, esports, and so much more. You can now win up to 2,000 times your money on PrizePicks. PrizePicks offers Venmo, MasterCard, and Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, let's get back into it. This is from Mark Daniels. He's one of the Q&A regulars over at Boston Sports Journal. So, Mark, we shifted your question over here. I answered it on there, but I'm also going to answer it on the podcast. Hi, Joe. It's a multi-pronged question here. Do you think Sweeney didn't go after bigger fish in the free agent market because, number one, he feels a little burnt about the return so far on last year's signings of Lindholm and Zadorov and was being risk averse? I mean, I think that's a little part of it. And there's more to this question, but I'll take this part first. I think that's a little part of it. But I think what it does is it speaks to, you got to be careful with the big money contracts. Like, you've got to really, really love a player, really think he's going to be a big difference maker, and really feel like he checks all the boxes if you're going to overextend and pay the premium costs of bringing in a player in free agency, especially if it's one of the big fish, one of the big dogs that's going to command a lot of money. I think they really liked Elias Lindholm, and I think that was clear. They had liked him in his draft year. They had almost traded for him previously. We had heard rumors of that, and they were interested. And, there was a few different times when they were interested in that player before they got him. So I think that was genuine, and they really liked him and felt like he was worth the money. And it's understandable, like, some of the parallels to Patrice Bergeron and his style of play that Elias Lindholm has. I do not think Elias Lindholm is the same player as Patrice Bergeron. I do not think he is as good as Patrice Bergeron, but I think there are some similar qualities there that they bring to the table that the Bruins really liked. Nikita Zadorov, I had not heard as much about them really having long time interest in that player before they signed him, but let's face it, ever since Zdeno Chara retired, they needed a big, mean, intimidating defenseman on the back that could stand up for teammates, that would throw bodies around, that would make it really uncomfortable to get to the front of the net, that would do all that stuff. And Zadorov is that type of guy. You know, he's a different style player than Zdeno Chara was. A little more risky, high risk player. Definitely plays away from the net more than Zdeno Chara did as a defenseman. But I think is also a guy that, you know, when push comes to shove, will bring some of the elements and qualities that Chara did to the table. And I think they knew they needed a guy like that. And Zadorov made a ton of sense because there's not many of those guys out there. But I do think when you sign some players like that and the returns are mixed, like, you know, slow starts for both of them. They both ended up hitting their stride and I thought were very good, you know, the last few months of the season. And you hope that carries over into next year. But you never want to read too much into like garbage time at the end of a year when a team is out of it and the way that they look and play. But like, I think it makes you a little hesitant, or it at least makes you remind yourself that this is going to have to be somebody that we absolutely love and know is going to hit if we're going to sign them to that kind of a contract, because we can't afford more of the David Backes, Matt Bolesky type players that you signed to big money and they come in and they're not able to live up to it. And that's just part of it. All right. Number 2, the big fish that were available to sign, like Ehlers, didn't want to sign in Boston because the bigger fish, didn't like the direction the team is headed. Therefore, Sweeney had no chance to sign them. With Ehlers, I never heard him linked to the Bruins. I never heard any of the big name free agents. And let's face it, the other part of this is that most of them re-signed with their own teams. Brock Besser, Brad Marchand, Sam Bennett. Go down the line, there was a bunch of players that would have been good free agents that never got there. So that kind of took a lot of choices off the table for the Bruins and also made it a much sort of narrower field of talent in free agency. But Nikolai Ehlers seemed like he really wanted to go to Carolina. It seemed like Boston was never an option. Frankly, I'm not sure that Boston loved him like some of the other teams did either. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But it didn't seem like he was anybody that was they were ever overly interested in, and that he was ever overly interested in them. And I'm going to there's another question coming up, and I'm going to get to why I think that is, and I have a theory on that. But let's finish this question first. Lastly, I did read your article as to Sweeney's free agent signings. I just don't agree with Sweeney's logic. For instance, why sign Jeannot? Is he really that much of an improvement over Frederick? And that's from Mark Daniels. I think Jeannot is an improvement over Trent Frederick because I think Jeannot wants to play the role that they wanted Trent Frederick to play. And I don't think Trent Frederick always wanted to play that role or always was super excited about it or always sort of embraced it. I think he was somebody that at times could play that role, but I think there was some hesitancy there. And I don't think he put fear into a lot of other teams. Like, I think some, they obviously respected him. He was a tough kid. But I think Jeannot is a little different. I think Jeannot is a little more of a player that puts a little bit of fear into the other team as far as when he drops the gloves, as far as going after the other team's tough guys, as far as sticking up for his teammates, as far as setting the physical tone, like all that stuff. I do think they needed a player like that. And I think you decide that 5 years of him is better than signing Trent Frederick to an 8-year deal and off a down season and re-signing him to keep him. And, that they basically signed Jeannot to the slot that they probably had in mind for Frederick, that it just wasn't going to happen with him. And they, I think, frankly, decided after a certain amount of time, like, we just can't keep him. He's not going to be a guy we want to invest that kind of money in term in. So they decided to go with Jeannot instead. So I like the logic. I like the signing. I think you need a player like that. I think you definitely need a player like that when James Haggs makes it to the NHL to kind of protect him and allow him to do his thing, and a player that can stand up for him and go after guys if they try to take shots at Haggs and if they try to take runs at him. I think you're going to need a player like Jeannot to protect him for sure. So I like the signing. You know, I've call me a Neanderthal, call me a hockey caveman, call me like outdated and old school, whatever you want to call me. I don't care. I just think you need players like Tanner Jeannot. And now they also needed it because Marcus Stellick has had concussion issues, and you don't know if he's going to be able to play the role and sort of do it as much with as much aplomb as he did last year when he did it and he got banged up as a result of it and got a bad concussion. And now you've got some questions about him and whether how much he's going to be able to play that role and if he's going to be able to continue the style of play that he had last year moving forward. And I think those are legitimate concerns, and I think you want to, take your time with that and be careful with that, and be careful with that player and everything you went through. So I think for all those reasons, it made sense. If it gets to a point where Kostelic really isn't fighting anymore and shouldn't be fighting, and shouldn't be engaging in any of that stuff with other defending his teammates, then you're going to need somebody that can do that. And you don't want Zadorov doing it and being in the box all the time. So it made sense to bring in a guy that could do it and also that can actually play a shift and has been a decent player in the league. Do I think he's going to score 27 goals like he did his first year in Nashville? No, but I think he could be double-digit goals and get up to like 20 points and be a serviceable bottom six guy that also plays physical and drops the gloves. And I think that's what you're going for there. That's what you want. And maybe it's a little bit of an overpay, but the salary cap is going over 100 million next year. 3 point whatever million is not going to seem like a big cap hit for that player moving forward. And I think people are going overboard thinking it's a bad contract when they're getting a little too carried away with that. All right. This is from J Muse 45. The Bees didn't save bullets for next year. Everyone they signed got multiple years, so there's no cap already tied up on replacement level guys that are just clogging the pipeline. All right, replacement level. First of all, definitely a stat geek, baseball stat nerd there that's sending this question. Salute you. Replacement level player is definitely baseball nerd talk, and I know that because I could baseball nerd it up with the best of them. But you're wrong a little bit. I mean, Frank, just by virtue of the signings themselves, sure, but you got to consider Victor Arvidsson in here as sort of an free agent acquisition that was basically like a signing, but he's in the last year of his contract. All right. So that's $4 million that's coming off the cap after the season with Arvidsson. And you've got $900,000 for Johnny Beecher. You did sign him to a 1-year contract. So they did sign somebody to a 1-year contract. He did not get multiple years. So that's like 4.9 that's coming off the books. And add all that together, you know how much the Bruins have in salary cap space next year right now at this point? Without even anybody else getting traded or coming off the books, they have $20 million in cap space next year. The cap is going up over $100 million. So they did save bullets for next year by not overextending, by not overspending, by trading for a guy that only has 1 year left on his contract in Victor Arvidsson. They have put themselves, the Boston Bruins, in a place where they can pay for Jack Eichel next year if they want. They could pay for Connor McDavid next year if somehow he gets to free agency and wanted to play for the Boston Bruins. There is a massive upgrade, you like that upgrade in talent level for next year's free agent class. Yes, some of these players will re-sign with their teams, but not all of them. And I think if a guy like Jack Eichel gets to free agency, I think the Bruins will have the money to sign him and will be all over that trying to get a player like that. And I think that is when they will be okay to overpay for a player like that can come in and be a serious impact center, impact forward, definitely top six guy, obviously, and can really help them. And the Bruins have put themselves in a position where they can do that. So this is kind of like what we're looking at for the retooling, right? Is this year is going to be a little bit of a bridge year. Maybe they get to the playoffs via wild card. They sort of get back to basics defensively. They get Jeremy Swayman back on track. They win low-scoring games where they're playing, got good defense and good goaltending going on. and they sort of build back up to the way that they want to play. They do it with some character guys, some physical guys, and then they can introduce towards the end of this year James Haggs to the mix. Then they will have salary cap space if they're trending upward to go out and get that difference making needle moving player like a guy like Jack Eichel to bring in next year. And then they will have Haggs and they will have other players on board, and you start to look at them as a little bit of a different level and different talent level, and they could make a real big jump in year 2 to year 3 of this retooling. And I think that's what the Bruins have in mind. I think this is a 2 to 3 year plan, and some people are all doom and gloom, being like, oh, this team's not going to make the playoffs next year. There's no hope for the next 2 or 3 years. You can't look that far into the future. You have no idea what this team is going to look like in 2 to 3 years. You have no idea what impact Haggs can have if he has a great year at BC and comes in online at the end of the year. You have no idea what they're able to sign next year in free agency when there's a much better free agent class that is much more worth the money that's going to be doled out to come in and up the talent level, up the dynamic offensive ability, and really upgrade the top 6 and have them at a very dangerous level moving forward. I just think when you look at it from a really pessimistic perspective, sure, you can be really down on the Bruins and you can say things look awful, but I think they're positioning themselves, and I think there's a long-term plan to get them maybe 2 years from now to really be back to where they want to be. And I think it's very realistic that they will be able to do that based on the cap space they have, based on the players they have, based on the draft picks they have. They've put themselves in a good position to build it back up in the next couple of years the right way, to be really back in the mix and where they want to be maybe 2 seasons from now. And it comes down to next year building back up the right way, getting back to basics, playing hard, like playing the right way with defense and goaltending, and playing in a simple brand of hockey that is going to allow them to be competitive before they really start to add on the bigger pieces and really start to go for it. And I think they will. I think there's a really realistic timeline here of seeing the Bruins a couple of years from now being back to a really good level where they're going to be competing for a Stanley Cup 2 to 3 years. I really think, based on everything that's going on with them, based on the way they're doing things, based on sort of the plan that it seems like is in place, that could happen. Now, are you going to have to be able to get the job done and sign one of these big fish free agents a couple of years from now and get them to come to Boston and believe and buy into what you're doing? Of course. I mean, that's part of the whole deal. Is being able to do that and finding a way to make that happen. But like Don Sweeney, I think, has done that in the past. He's shown the ability to get players to want to come here and to stay here. And it's going to be on him to do it again. And it's going to be a harder sell, obviously, with no Brad Marchand and no Patrice Bergeron, but they still have David Pastrnak. They still have Charlie McAvoy. They still have which should be a really good goalie and back into a top peak performance next year in Jeremy Swayman. They've still got some decent bones to this team, and I think they're going to show that next year. Do I think there's going to be some growing pains? Yes. Do I think it's going to take them a little while before they really get up to speed, especially with a bunch of new pieces in place? For sure. I think it's going to take a little bit. And I do think it's going to be, I said this in the last show, I think it's going to be really hard for them to make the playoffs next year. Based on the Atlantic Division, based on how good it's going to be, based on Ottawa being better, based on the Red Wings being better, based on the Canadiens being better. Even the Sabres are better. But I do think they're going to be better than a couple of those teams. But I think the Bruins are really going to have to hope also that either Tampa or Toronto really falls out of it. And either Tampa starts to really show that they're too old, or Toronto just has a hard time with Mitch Marner gone and starts to, implode on itself, just based on the way that they're built and based on the pressure that's going on there and based how they frankly haven't been able to live up to it for this long. So it's a little bit of believing in what you're doing and then also hoping that there's a regression from some of the other teams in the division, which is asking for a lot. So a lot, I think, is going to have to happen for the Bruins to actually make a wild card spot and make the playoffs next year. A lot is going to have to go right for them and wrong for somebody else. It's possible, but we'll see. But like, I'm also, I think, more bullish and more optimistic on the long-term plan and the long-term prognosis for this team, and the long-term sort of diagnosis of what they're going to be and analysis of what they're going to be. Like, I think I could see a very realistic scenario where 2 to 3 years from now, they're really back in a much better spot and they're playing the way that they're supposed to play. They've got a new wave of young players that have joined the established players that they have. The core group has really taken a step forward, and they've added to it with some more star power via free agency and the money that they have tons of to go after players next year. Now, the other part of that is that there's, I think, going to be a lot of other teams with the cap going up over 100 million. They're going to have cap space next year to sign players. So it's not going to be easy. They're going to have to compete with other teams and find some way to offer something that the other teams can't, or find something that's more attractive about them than some of the other teams. But like, they still have some things going for them. I do not believe for a second that there's a wide swath of players that are like, we're not playing for Boston. Like, we don't like it there, or it's not good for players, or, that's a place we want to avoid. It's not a destination spot. I disagree with that. I think it's one of those destination spots in the NHL still, even to this point. Even if they didn't get a big name free agent on July 1, because I'm not sure they really wanted any. But, we'll see how things go into place now and how this plan progresses moving forward. But for now, I think the Don Sweeney retooling, the draft, free agency, the trade deadline, all that stuff leading into now, I think has done a pretty good job. And I think has put them in place to do exactly what they want to do, and is not, back them into a corner in any way, shape, or form with assets, with the salary cap, with any of that stuff. On the contrary, I think the contracts that they gave out gave them flexibility to still do a lot this season in trades coming up, and then also in free agency after that. I think that was a big part of what they did, was not tying themselves down to too much and being flexible to go after other things as they may become options. And that's really what it's all about, especially if you're in the situation that they are. All right, that's it for questions this week. Thank you for tuning in. Let's give a shout out one more time to the show being brought to you by PrizePicks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. We are also a proud member of the CLNS Media Network. Make sure to hit the subscribe button to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel and turn on notifications for when a new video drops on the channel. And then we have NBA History Channel, CLNS Media Network, and Celtics All Access on CLNS, Patriots Press Pass, all good stuff on the YouTube channels. So tune into all that, and also make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new Pucks with Haggs podcast video drops on the interwebs. All right, everybody, that's it for the Pucks with Haggs podcast. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you at the rink.